Hi, I'm Mike, owner of the In Groove in Phoenix, Arizona. I get a lot of requests to do system tours, so today I finally decided to do that. I've just recently redesigned a few things. I've added these new Solidsteel shelves, which are fantastic. I used to have it on a dual shelf, and with the size of the amps, the weight, there was just always a little bit of wobble. You know, this has really increased the sound quality. There's a lot less, it's a lot lower noise floor. It's really noticeable with the Solidsteel shelves. These things are beastly. I think there's some at 150 pounds a piece. Very, very nice addition. Wasn't the cheapest thing. Retail on these is $2,500 a shelf, and then the amp stands. So it was it was an investment. It was a chunk of money, but well worth it. We'll start at the preamp. I've got the C1000 and the C1000 tube head. This particular design preamp was originally, you could get it as a 3-tier system. You could get it the C1000 with the tube and with a solid state, and you could switch between the two. But I'm more of a tube solid state guy. I like the combination that it, the sound combination. I much prefer tube preamps, solid state amps versus the other way around. You get the benefits on the amps of the solid state, that slam, that drive, that forcefulness in the bass. It's not as soft and mushy. And you get a lot of the warmth from the pre. So I've got the C1000, the C1000 tube preamplifier. The latest edition, my phono stage, and this was really, although I got a lot of Mcintosh pieces and I've been a fan of the brand, this was more of a functionality piece. I'm debating on another turntable at the moment. I had 2 turntables here, a dedicated stereo and a dedicated mono, but got a few things in mind. I'm looking at, again, another turntable. This is just sitting here unplugged. I am a big reel-to-reel guy. I'm gonna get this tested. Or not tested, I'm gonna get this thing plugged in. It does work. I had it at the shop for quite a while. But again, this is more of a functional piece. This gives you the ability to hook up 3 turntables and you can load them any which way. Your gains, your capacitance, all of that is customizable for all 3 turntables. It also has a real high quality DAC, so you can digitize some stuff. I'm not a big fan of digitizing everything, but there's some stuff that, a lot of private label funk and a lot of private label jazz that never came out digital or CD. So I like to digitize that stuff so I can bring it into the store rather than transporting records that are $500, $1,000 a piece. I could just digitize them and we listen to them at the store on a NAS drive. So a lot of functionality with that. That's the MP1100 by Mac. That's their newest top tier tube phono stage. Fantastic unit, really sounds great. A non-existent noise floor, especially for a tube phono stage. Fantastic piece. I've got a couple of step-up transformers down here. Excuse me. I've got an ST80 SE by Ortofon. And I also have a Mawagami Labs. This was for my mono deck. I have a Mawagami Zero, and that was the matching step-up transformer for it. Not plugged in at the moment. And then right next to it is actually just the power supply for my AMG turntable. AMG turntable. Cartridge on this right at the moment is an Ortofon Windfeld TI. Fantastic cartridge. I had an AMG, I had a Benz LPS on this table originally. That's when I bought the table. That was the cartridge that was on it. It sounded great. And when I first got this Windfeld, I wasn't a huge fan of it. And I wore out the Benz. I needed to send it in for retipping. So I got this, and the Benz, I was waiting to have it retipped. I got this cartridge, and I had it, and I felt like I was missing something. So I said, you know what? I'm just gonna buy a second Benz, and I gotta get my cartridge back. I gotta get my table back to sounding the way I remember it. And then, you know, I'll have two Benzes, and then while one's being retipped, I have one to play. Well, what ended up happening was I put the Benz back on it, and it kind of dawned on me, you know, it's a lot harsher and a lot more crunch. And although this particular cartridge doesn't have the bite and the drive that Benz did, this is such a melodic cartridge. Fantastic. The Benz ended up coming off, and I've had the Windfeld on ever since. It's a fantastic cartridge. Again, it doesn't have that bite and that drive that's the Benz did. It requires a lot more gain. It's only 0.2 millivolts of output, hence the reason for the step up. I prefer running this cartridge a little bit overloaded. It sounds a little bit better. It requires about 65 decibels a gain. In that range, I run it a little hot at 68 decibels a gain between the step up, and I drive the phono stage back down to 40 decibels a gain. So it gives me 28, 40, gives me 68 decibels a gain. That's really, sound-wise, that's optimal, I found, for this cartridge. But love the AMG table, fantastic table for the money. It really is a bargain, although, you know, it's some odd $20,000, but compared to a lot of other tables out there, it is a fantastic table. Mcintosh XRT, or excuse me, Mcintosh 1.2 kWs, 1200 watt monoblocks. Kind of a requirement in my system because I'm a huge fan of the speakers that I have, and the speakers that I have require a lot of power. I'll show those to you in a minute, but 1200 watt monoblocks, endless amounts of power. Not a speaker on earth I don't imagine you can't push with these things. My digital, which is actually about to be eliminated from my system because I never use it, is a Meridian Sulus. It's antique at this point. I bought this thing when it was new, over 10 years ago. Control 15 with the media drive 600 and the media source 600. It was an absolute ton of money when it was new, but pretty much worthless at this point. I had debated getting a new one, and I kind of had picked out a few things, and I said to my wife, you know, why don't we get this? And then went back, put on a record, and like 10 minutes later, I said, you know what, let's just not get anything because I don't listen to this, and if I had a new one, I wouldn't listen to that either. I got everything I want on vinyl, and I prefer the sound, and I'll never spend as much money again on the digital end as I did on the analog front end, so why waste the money? The analog front end is where I've invested. It's what I prefer. I don't like the sound of digital. I don't own a CD player. I've got about 15 CDs. You know, this was kind of like an experiment. I got the new Lana Del Rey record as a Japanese pressing because the US is just so obnoxiously compressed. I wanted to see, you know, maybe they took it easy on the Japanese pressing, which they didn't. The vinyl, significantly less compressed. But that was kind of an experiment to see, you know, are they making decent digital that's not compressed and smushed? And it really appears that that they're not. So I'm not really down to spend a bunch of money on a digital front end that I'll never use. The Akai 4-track. I'm a big reel-to-reel fan. I'm not a big reel-to-reel fan on the lower speed stuff. It generally sounds like crap. There are a few tapes that are just absolutely dynamite, put a lot of records to shame. So I've got about 40 tapes that are actually really, really good. But in my experience, when I'm buying tapes and I listen to them, I mean, 1 in 50 tapes is worth keeping. For the most part, the lower speed 7.5 or 3 3/4 IPS tapes, actually all the 3 3/4 stuff is just absolute rubbish. I've had a couple Supreme titles and whatnot that are decent, but none of them are great. On 7.5, there's some titles. There's an Al Green title that's fantastic, Call Me. There's Black Moses by Isaiah Case. I found a lot of the R&B titles from the late 60s and early 70s are pretty fantastic. And then when you get to the earlier stuff, the late 50s and the early 60s, then you're going to find a lot more tapes that are really good. But I'm going to get this thing plugged in before too long. That's not going to be a permanent spot for it. I'm going to put a turntable there, but maybe when I eliminate the digital, I'll move it here and keep it in the system. But that's not my real, that's not my main reel-to-reel deck. I'll show you that in a minute here. But yeah, preamp, some step-up transformers, phono stage, AMG turntable, Mcintosh 1200 watt monoblock amps, and the Akai fantastic tape deck. This thing was like brand new. I bought a classical record collection. The guy had a pair of K horns, but this particular Akai is pretty fantastic. That's a GX635D. It was like brand new. He had some Barclay Crocker tapes. He had some tapes that he had played with it, but for the most part, this thing was really cherry, so I kept it. And I've been using it at the shop and now at the house. All right, let's take a look at the speakers. All right, and these are my speakers. These are Mcintosh line array XRT1ks. I love line array speakers. I have a pair of XRT24s from the 90s at the store. I have the XRT1ks here at the house. I like, Mcintosh gets a lot of heat for their speakers. They're not really well received in the audiophile community, but I prefer the sound of a line array. I like big, massive sound coming straight at you, high pressure levels, and a realistic live sound. And that's what you get with a line arrays. You go to a concert, it's a line array hanging from the rafters. That's why I have them here at the house. I love the sound of them. They're fantastic. You don't have such a tiny little sweet spot. I don't have to, I can have people in my listening room. We can all enjoy good sound. Audiophiles sometimes get into the weeds, with the speakers. Oh, can you hear the triangle? Listen to that triangle in the distance. For me, it's the overall presentation of the music. And I really dig the line arrays. These things go down sub 20 hertz, and I think they go to 50,000 kilohertz. I mean, amazing frequency range. You can play them nice and soft. You can play them monstrously loud. They sound fantastic at all frequencies. This is the last generation of their speakers. The newest generation is kind of made by Sonus Faber and Mac. I think it's more of a partnership type of speaker. I've heard them, has a different sound. Not a bad sound, it's a different sound. I kind of prefer this. I prefer the 1K, and I prefer the old, the step up from this, the 2Ks, which are a little bit massive for my house. That requires some serious listening space. But fantastic sounding speaker, aluminum case. They're ported out the top. An endless amount of drivers, 2 woofers that they'll push some air. When I first got them, one of the first things I listened to was Tchaikovsky's 1812, the Teldark digital Canon SACD. It was, at the time, it was a rip from the SACDs that I had on the Sulus. And man, when those cannons went off, these lower woofers probably popped out 4 inches. I thought I did something. Thought they were going to explode out of the speaker, but fantastic speaker. Love them. Speaker wire, this is actually a temporary cable. I've got a special size on order. I use Wireworld speakers, or excuse me, Wireworld cable throughout. Again, this is just a cheap cable. I've kind of settled on the Eclipse 8. I dig the performance for price. I don't like spending a ton of money on speaker cable. No Nordis, Odins, or $80,000 cables for me. But, I'm not going to get the cheapest thing. And one of the reasons is, better cables are really shielded well. And if you live in a city where there's a lot of signals and stuff going through the air, one of the main reasons you want to look at a good cable is shielding. There's different copper constructions and everything of that nature that make a difference. But a good shielded cable makes a huge difference. Especially when you're dealing with, low level signals from a turntable, low voltage. You want to have something that's well shielded. All right, let me show you my reel-to-reel player. All right, this is my ATR 102. This is a studio machine. This was never meant for the home market. These were ridiculously expensive when they were new, and they're ridiculously expensive now. This machine was refurbished by Mike Spitz, who passed not too long ago, at ATR Magnetics. They're the top Ampex guys in the country. But I'm a big fan of the master tape 15 IPS format. Tape Project, Opus, Analog Productions are all doing them now. It is the absolute best thing you will ever hear. Unfortunately, you know, the master tapes are $450 to $550, $600 an album. There's virtually zero choices. You know, there's a couple hundred albums at the absolute most you can purchase. But if you want to hear something sound the absolute best it can ever possibly sound, it's going to be a copy of the master tape. A while back at my store, we hosted the Arizona audio video club. And I remember I brought the machine to the shop and we did a demo. I took Lee Morgan's The Sidewinder. We listened to it on just a standard Redbook CD, a HD Tracks high resolution file. We listened to it on the original Rudy Van Gelder mastered pressing, the Music Matters pressing, excuse me, and then the Analog Productions double disc 45. And a lot of the guys were not really reel-to-reel guys, and they thought it was a lot of snake oil. And you know, they were listening, but they were kind of chatting and having a good time, and put the reel-to-reel on, and it was amazing how everybody just got quiet, followed into the speakers, and were blown away by the sound. Reel-to-reel is nothing like you'll ever hear in this world. And you know, it's not something I listen to every day, but when I really want to listen to something that's absolutely, you know, spectacular, I'll put on Shahrazad. Willie and the Poor Boys is one of the tapes I have. Sonny Rollins' Saxophone Colossus is absolutely mind-blowing. Lee Morgan's The Sidewinder. The master tape versions are the absolute best you will ever hear. But fantastic machine. They become really, really desirable with the tape movement. You know, but they're still really desirable in studios. Ampexes have that true iconic American sound that is legendary. You know, this is what most American records are mastered on in the 70s and the 80s. You know, I know Jack White has a 1-inch version of this machine with the 1-inch tape heads. Actually, when I got this machine, it had 1-inch tape heads. I had to get a brand new head unit, 1/4 inch. So I actually have a 1-inch tape head, and I have the 1/4 inch tape head. You know, I don't use the 1-inch. You can get some tapes they'll custom make in 1-inch, but you know, considering the master is 1/4 track, I don't see a huge benefit in spending quadruple the money on a 1-inch tape for something that started off originally as a 1/4 inch tape. But that's the ATR 102. One more thing I want to talk about is the Vicoustic paneling. As much as I'm a fan of the line array speakers, they have a massive amount of upper end. So it was a little bit of a challenge to tame this room. So you'll kind of see I have the Vicoustic corners pieces in, and that really tamped down the sound of the room. But the Vicoustic treatments helped a bit, and then, you know, it was a matter of some other dampening as far as, you know, you saw the wood paneling behind the stereo system, and there's some other spots, you know, carpeting, the Vicoustics, the wood paneling. By the speakers, I have, you know, the curtains. I mean, all that really brought this down to where I wasn't getting bombarded with high-end frequencies. Really dialed the room in perfectly. But very important, a lot of people don't pay attention to the acoustics of the room, but they make an absolute huge difference. All right, guys, that's my system in 2020. There are some changes coming, and I'll go over that with you momentarily when I get those changes in place, but this is my first system tour. All right, guys, don't forget to subscribe and to like my videos. There's more to come. I'm working on some stuff. Until next time. I almost forgot one of the most important things, the listening chair. This is a Eames lounge chair.